My head hurts. I'm mad at the government. And it's like 80 degrees in February. I had 2 more vlogs that I was working on that I was like filming for like all of January, or at least part of January. I had the footage through January, and the audio was horrific. So I'm trying something new that'll hopefully create less of that like scraping sound that was going on that I couldn't get rid of, and I don't know how to describe very well. So when I was in the thick of trying to figure it out, I couldn't word it well enough to look for answers. But I have the lav mic clipped onto my wooden printmaking spoon, like on the head of it, and it's being held in place in front of me by the box that my iPad is sitting on. I've got a makeshift boomstick sort of situation. I wasn't lying when I said my head hurt. It does. I've had a headache all day. I just found my Tylenol, so I'm hoping it goes away. I haven't been working on I've been working on stuff, but I like just finished an altar cloth that I've been working on. I finished the tapestry I was working on for a friend. Pretty much, I just need to figure some stuff out about like attaching it to a dowel rod and stuff. And I made a fuck ton of stitch markers, which is fun. I have to get my paperwork in order so I can open an artisan's cooperative shop, because I did get approved for that. So I can do that when I have my paperwork in order. I'm so tired, besties. We're out here doing the best we can. I've gotta also call my representatives tonight or tomorrow this week. Gotta do it this week to ask Ted Cruz to reject the Republican-backed SAVE Act, which, for those who don't know, it would make it a lot harder, for people to register to vote and renew their voter's registration after they like move or if they change political affiliations. It also requires proof that you were born in the US, basically for all of them, which a lot of our federal, like our government IDs, whether it's state or tribal or like federal, don't have. They don't usually have our birthplace on them because that's weird to put. It doesn't matter that I was born in New Jersey. It's not relevant, like at all. The most it's been relevant for me was when I got a tarot reading a couple months ago. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So it's not put on any documents. It's not on my driver's license. It's not on most government issued IDs. You can, under the SAVE Act, use your military ID, essentially, as long as you also include the record, your military service record, which needs to confirm that you were born in the US. Your driver's license doesn't cut it anymore, which used to basically be the way people registered. And your birth certificate has to have, assuming you're the one applying, your legal name, at least one parent's full legal name, and be, filed properly and stuff. Which sounds fine, right? Until your mom got remarried and changed her legal name, but of course didn't update your birth certificate, or you got married and changed your last name, or a family made a new surname or hyphenated their surname after the couple got married. Like, even taking trans people out of the equation, assuming these are all cis people and frankly cis het people getting married, that could spell a lot of trouble, because I don't know how common it is for people to change their birth certificate when they change their legal name, because I don't think you have to do that when you change your legal name. I could be wrong, and it might be state dependent. But like in Texas, if you want to change what's on your birth certificate, you have to get a court order. So, and if you're registering by mail, you can't, like, they won't process it. They won't process your application until you go in person to an applicable election officer's office, and an election official's office, and give them your documentation. And from what I understand of the wording, it can't be like a copy. It has to be the document. Also, if you hear a rattling sound, it's because the AC just turned on, and my ceiling vent is hanging on by a single bolt. So when the AC turns on, it shakes. My fan isn't on in case it decides to fall, because if my fan is on when that happens, it'll bump into the fan and everything will get worse. So many people will have lost their homes and the documents that they need to, register to vote. And with the way that the Republicans of the current administration wants to gut federal bureaucracy, federal departments and things, and government offices in general, it's gonna be worse than the DMV. Like, what do you mean everyone has to go in person? How does that work? And what it really is an attempt to strip us of our constitutional right to vote. But anyway, I'm going to try not to talk about politics too much, at least for this video. I do want to make a video on craftivism as a concept, because that's something I've been thinking of. I would do it about the history of craft and craftivism, because of course that's part of the history of craft, and also that's really interesting to me. I took a whole class on it. It was kind of funny that our professor kept having us, it probably didn't help that it was over Zoom entirely. I was going to say basically, but it was entirely over Zoom. So she would have us keep coming back to this question of like art versus craft, and all of us came to the conclusion pretty immediately that they're the same thing, because they are. Craft is a social concept. Art is craft and craft is art. We've just decided that some crafts are better, quote unquote, than others, and that's a whole other thing. A lot of that happened in the Renaissance with painters, where it was considered better than like sculpting, for example, because you could listen to music while you were painting and you didn't get as dirty and gross and dusty. So like, that was part of the reasoning. That's part of why women sculptors were looked down upon for so long, because it was a dirty art discipline, on top of them being a woman. It's a whole thing. So I want to do something on that, but I need to do research into that. I need to like plan out what days I want to do research, and I need to try and find a deadline for myself. I think I want to get it done by the end of the month. I think that's what I'm going to do, and try to have a few vlogs in between that are just me talking, maybe a day's worth, maybe like this, where I might just turn this into one day and not have it spliced with different days, and just do that when I can, because I think I've been overthinking it, and like, it has to be a whole thing. It doesn't. It really doesn't have to be a whole thing. I said I was going to talk about politics, and that's still not going to be the main thing I'm going to talk about. I apologize to anyone I jump scared, especially people outside of the U.S., that I kind of just steamrolled like that as the first thing I talked about. But that's just who I am. I can't not talk about politics on some level. It's fascinating. and horrifying. The project I'm working on right now is Heels and Needles Knits Bastille sweater. I'm working on the first set of decreases, which is fun. It's been I'm trusting the process and it's working out so far. I think I'm pretty sure. I'm also stress testing the a couple of the stitch markers I made to make sure they're not stretching out the stitches, like they're not too heavy, and that they hold up to being. If they can handle me, I think they can handle most situations, most reasonable situations that a stitch marker would go through. But I think I'm gonna glaze these instead of buffing like you would normally do with polymer clay. I might try to buff them still, but that way I don't potentially separate them from the eyelets, and I can also hopefully strengthen the eyelet, if that makes sense. Make it less likely that the eyelid will pop out. That the eyelet will pop out. Especially since I, at the very least, want to paint. I might paint eyes on the bird stitch markers. So if I do that, I'm putting on glaze regardless. And I'm going to be sanding them. So I'm already a bit nervous about that. I'm slowly starting to figure things out on the production end of it, though. I've been pretty much focusing on this for a while because I was getting nervous because I hadn't started it and it'd been almost a week, and we have until April 11th, so we've got a good long while. I found her call through the Size Inclusive Collective, and part of the criteria for the admin of that account sharing a testing call, like on honor stories, is sufficient testing time. And almost mid-April, is more than enough. That's like, what, 12 weeks? Something like that? Probably a little less now. Yeah, for this, I'm trying so that I can keep that. There are several parts of the pattern so far, at least, where the instructions say to repeat a certain set of rows a certain number of times. So to help me keep track, I've got my row counter. I think Susan Bates. It doesn't matter. I got it thrifted. Right. My gloves. I got like proper compression gloves. Because this pair was HSA eligible, so I didn't have to pay for it out of pocket, which was great. And the only reason I would have gotten them and not felt horrible about it, because they were like $20. And $20 is rough for me to try and do right now. Especially since I do have another pair, but I needed this pair because I can't work or like knit or crochet or anything. I can't do fine motor skill types of things with the pair I have. This is why I need them. I heavily suspect I'm hypermobile. I was basically diagnosed, I think. It's sometimes unclear to me whether a doctor is just suspecting that it's the case or whether they are actually diagnosing you. But I sprained my shoulder a while back, and it was painful enough and had been made worse enough by my attempt to commute into work that day that I decided to go to a doctor to try and get it all sorted and make sure there weren't any serious issues. And there weren't. Thankfully, it was just, like you'd expect, you gotta wait it out sort of thing. But I was doing this. I'm purposefully trying to not do it in a way where it'll make loud cracking sounds, because I know that people get bothered by it. I was doing this and like cracking my joints like I do almost constantly. Do your stretches, kids. The doctor was like, wait a second. And I was like, was I doing something wrong? Is she mad? She's like, do that again. And so I did. And she was like, she started asking me questions and she had me do the test. And I definitely fit the criteria. I can do enough of the things that the test asks you to do. I can do this, which apparently most people can't do. My arms do this. My legs do a very similar thing. I have ballet knees, I think is what they're called. The only thing I can't do is touch my hands to the ground. I've never been able to do that. So she was like, yeah, look into hypermobility. I was like, okay, cool, because apparently she does the same thing. And no one had caught it before. But it explains why my joints feel bad all the time. For this project, for this sweater, I'm using mostly yarn from my stash. Mostly all yarn from my stash, and mostly from Thistle Creative Reuse. I have several postcards from them up here, actually. This one is from sometime between 1907 and 1908, and I know that because of the stamp box, because I have to identify postcards sometimes and date them using the stamp box as part of my job. I'll share it up here. I believe it's the AZO with triangles, upright triangles in all four corners, and that the date range overall. Let me untangle this. The date range overall for that stamp box is, I believe, 1904 till 1918, but this postcard has a divided back, so it's from 1907 onwards, because that's, I think, what was it, like March? Early to mid-year 1907 is when divided back postcards were approved for use in the US. And this was from, like, Kansas or some shit. Like, that's where the photo was taken. And the US was I believe, the country. It's a real photographic postcard, which was very common at the time when postcards were new. The university I work for has a lot of has a lot of items having to do with the Mexican Revolution, and there are a truly horrific number of postcards that have dead bodies on them, because people were chilled with that back then, which, I mean, they saw a lot more death. That makes sense, like up close and personal. It had been, what, the 50 years, if that, from, depending on where you're counting from the American Civil War. There were various other wars. So, and I'm talking about the Civil War because I'm thinking about postcards from American photographers and tourists, and postcards that were sold to Americans. And so dead bodies were just, yeah, they would just be, I mean, on top of the not seeing Mexicans as people thing, and not seeing indigenous people as people, there's a lot of type of postcards. They're like, ooh, look at this new type of person. Isn't that interesting? Look at it, they're bathing in the river. Huh, we have never done that. Fuck off, Ralph. It's an interesting balance, trying to not censor or sugarcoat or whitewash history, while also finding the line where it's like, no, we don't need to put that up. And some of them are really clear. Some of them are extremely clear. You don't want to put white supremacist propaganda up on the internet. There's enough of that already. It's not necessary. It's not adding anything to the historical record. We don't need it. A poster for a J.C. Penney event has a slur that is either a slur or very much not considered as, it's a slur regardless, but the G slur is the one I'm thinking of, which is still in common use in the US, but is a slur. but isn't usually censored because it's like socially not considered a slur here for the most part. We didn't we ended up just not putting that poster up because we didn't. My supervisor didn't want to deal with it. I was like, you know what, fair. Another one recently is I went in and added content warnings to our items that had the slur for Indigenous women on it because it was only federally recognized as a slur very recently. And so in our items from like 2010 that had it, it wasn't, there were no warnings in the description. We include content warnings when something has like a violence or dead bodies or nudity or some such, or incredibly racist language. So when that showed up on an item I was doing the descriptive metadata for, my supervisor and I chatted about how to handle it, and then I was tasked with going into Content DM and updating our items, which there weren't too many, but they were spread around collections, so that was a bit frustrating, and I had to either copy and paste the word to put it into Content DM over and over again, or just type it out over and over again. They were like the same amount of time because it's a short word. So that was a fun shift. Not fun sarcastically, to be clear. But I do find the different ways that institutions handle sensitive content to be interesting, because there's they're all in similar bounds for the most part, but they're not the same. Because you also don't want to make decisions for other people about what's considered offensive and what's not. So like we don't, unless it falls under one of the standard, unless it's especially bad, or it falls under the like graphic content, we don't censor our items that have to do with slavery, because that's an event in history, and censoring everything that has to do with that is infantilizing, to be honest. And it serves to sugarcoat and whitewash things. And I'm not thinking about the difference between those two terms. And I think to me, they're synonyms. I just have the sense that they might be different or have slightly different connotations or something. I don't know. I'm trying to keep, I promise I'm trying to keep this in frame. But anyway, where was I going with that? Postcard, that's where I was going with that. That's where I went from that. And I have some of my own art up on the walls, and I, like, right here, that square one, and the, mushroom prints, and the hand print, that, and this one, this one, the sunrisey one, and the stormy one, and the blue one that's up on the top. And then I have a couple from Crow and Marigold Apothecary. There's probably an easier way to do this, but I've committed. And a couple from Erewhon. I believe that's how you pronounce the name. I apologize if not. This one's also by Crow and Marigold. The pomegranate hand prints are all from Erewhon, and most of my other postcards are either from, I forget who this one is by, because I've had it for years. But this was from the Dior exhibit at the Dallas Museum of Art. Same with the other dress. That one, I believe, was also at the Dallas Modern. I think I got it in high school. This one I got at the Barnes in Philly this past August. That's a card from Thistle. Niagara. Ooh. Between the blue illustration and the card back up there. That's Niagara. Thistle. Yeah, like I said, Crow and Marigold. Thistle. The purple one, Thistle. The orange one that matches, Thistle. I love Thistle. They're great. And I have a ton of card backs because I like collecting cards, including I don't know if it's here. The ciphered one, which I want to do at some point, which is why I put it on the wall. This way of easy access to it. And I believe, this is the card back to that set. And, of course, the Pride Night, I got both the rainbow and the regular sets, and this is the poem. The Pride Night card deck. These two are plastic card sets that my friend bought me from a garage sale. I have another set that he got me that's paper and much more fragile, and it is on Hermes' altar. But it's another double set. Yeah, I like cards. I like collecting cards. I think they're fun. I have a few more decks that were from, like, Five Below, because I got a gift card there a few years ago. And I got several cool-looking card decks, including one that's based around the national parks, and one that's based on different constellations, and a Minecraft deck, and I think a dog deck, or at least like a dog and cat deck or something like that, and I think a couple others, and I have the standard bicycle ones, bicycle brand decks too, the red and blue one. I don't have the backup here, and I don't intend to put it on here, I don't think. Maybe I will, I don't know. That's not in the cards right now. But I got the Cowboy Heaven deck that Meow Wolf sells, which is a poker and tarot deck. So I believe the Jokers act as pages. Maybe not. Maybe they're their own thing too. I don't remember. But that is Hermes' tarot deck specifically. And I managed to buy it basically in front of my mom without her asking too many questions, because she is not a fan of tarot decks. My parents are not a fan of that because they are very Mormon. Anyway, back to the yarn. I had all of this yarn in my stash, and I believe it's going to be enough. Most of it is from Thistle. So this brown yarn was made in the US. It's pure wool certified. It's moth treated, but it's not superwash. It says it's virgin wool or whatever. Sport weight 368 yards per skein, which I'll be honest is a lot. It looks like a lot anyway for the size of the skein. Yeah, color is old oak. Oh, it also says it's Brown Sheep Company. So I've got that. And I've got Joe Sharp brand yarn in shade 327. And they were 75 cents per skein. And I have like 5 of them. 4 of them. I think I might have dropped a skeiner. Like, I could have sworn I had 3 of these, but maybe I didn't. And if I need more, or for the collar, I have this, which I got forever ago for a project. This was not from Thistle. I'm pretty sure this is Woolies. The wool yarn that you can get at Walmart. It's either fingering or sport weight. I think it's fingering. But I did a swatch, and assuming I did the swatch correctly, the gauge matches, so I'm not worried about it. And it's a nice color scheme. Like, I think the black will be a nice contrast, even though it'll be a subtle contrast with oh, that shows up a lot better on camera. It's harder to tell, at least in person for me. It looks like it's, like, look, it's several shades darker than my shirt. But that's a nice, I like the color scheme. But yeah, once I finish the yoke, I'm gonna switch to the navy blue yarn. And I'm just gonna do that when I feel like it to try and spread out the colors, make sure I have them on, both the torso, but also on both sleeves. It'll be the easiest for me to get more of this yarn, which is why I'm trying to save it for the collar. But I think I might try a few thin stripes throughout the sweater because I think that'll balance it out more. I'm a fan of the cuff colors showing up in the sweater if the sweater isn't just a solid color. I do like contrast or like different colored cuffs from the body of the sweater too. I think that's fun. And I also like it when cuffs are different colors from each other when the like the ribbing is. I'm working also on a tapestry pattern, on the sample for a tapestry pattern. And I'm working through the written pattern myself to make sure that I typed everything out correctly. And if I did, I'm going to upload it. And that is going to be for sale, which is exciting. But also, and it'll just be on Etsy at first, and then I'll move it to Ko-fi and stuff once I have my sales permit and have everything I need to be able to sell off of Etsy. Sell as in like sell things not on Etsy. And I also am working on several patterns where the proceeds from buying the pattern will go towards specific like organizations and mutual aid funds. The one that I'm the furthest along on, where I'm actually testing the sample, is technically I finished the sample, so I could put it up, but I want to get further on the garment I'm making out of it. It's Bashback. It's based on Kaylin Conrad's Queer Rage and the Christian Right video, which that part of the video is talking about Queers Read This, which is a 1990 pamphlet written by, I believe it was a group of anonymous queer people. And I'm planning, I got a couple recommendations for a couple different groups, and I think I'm going to make a list of groups just to raise awareness for them. And maybe as a suggestion, like, hey, if you buy this Colorwork chart and you want to make finished objects to sell or use it in a different pattern that you're going to sell for fundraisers, right? I can't stop people from making finished objects and selling them not for fundraisers. But like in the spirit of the thing, if you'd like to either use it as a Colorwork part and a pattern you want to make and sell for as a fundraiser, or if you're planning on making finished objects with it to sell for a fundraiser, here's a few things you could try if you don't have any ideas. These are things that were suggested to me, even if I didn't ultimately go with them. Like one of them was a mutual aid group for people who are still trying to rebuild after the hurricanes, because they've been left behind, like in a huge way. I might make designs specifically for that, but I'm trying to work through the designs I've come up with and the groups I want to do first. Like that I feel are most urgent living in Texas. So not most urgent. Their stuff is also urgent, but like there are ICE raids going on. There have been protests against ICE in Dallas. There was a protest against ICE in my city on Saturday. So one of the designs, and I think I'm gonna need to rework it. So I haven't gotten to the point where I'm working on the physical thing yet. And I'm going to be testing it with different crafts, so like that one's probably going to be cross-stitch because that's what I have the colors for. But once I am done with that pattern, the proceeds will go, everything but the fees is what I mean. So everything but the Etsy fees, basically. And I'll price it according to that. That'll go towards, right now, I am planning on putting it towards the Immigration Legal Resource Center. And I have several other designs. One of them I plan to put toward, the Patchback one, I want to put towards an organization or a mutual aid fund dedicated to helping queer people get out of Texas and or other southern states, or the South generally, conservative states, red states generally. But Texas and Florida are two of the worst, or at least the most high profile of the worst. And I live in Texas, so it'd be nice to give back to the community that way, especially since, as far as I'm aware, at least I'm fairly safe, knock on wood. And I haven't looked into the other group that someone else suggested yet, but I plan to. yeah, my hand, like my thumb hurts because I'm using it to guide the project and shit like that. And this finger kind of hurts because it's bearing the brunt of the yarn tension. I had been wondering why people who do continental knitting were like, it's so hard, and like purling is so hard. I didn't understand that because I feel like my tension's decently even between knitting and purling, and purling is not that much slower. It might even be a bit faster than knitting. Like I'm purling right now, and it's been fine. It's because of how I hold my yarn. It's because I hold my yarn weird. Where I do this, and I've done that since I started to crochet. That's how I hold my yarn when I crochet. Haven't gotten carpal tunnel yet, knock on wood. I really hope that this audio is usable. I'm gonna keep at it if it's not, but I am gonna be upset also if it's not. And I need to make sure I'm not doing this wrong and haven't and shouldn't be like that. This shouldn't be a decrease row. I don't think it should, because I should be on row 10. No, because the decrease row 1 and then purl, knit, purl. So I was on the row that was the decrease row that was row 8 and then purl. So I should be on row 10. And I'm pretty sure I'm okay. I'm pretty sure I'm good. I'm refraining from bringing up the tariffs in the group chat. I'm practicing self-restraint. 13, 14. But was this a decrease row? Did I decrease 2 rows ago? Because if I decreased 2 rows ago, then I just forgot what set I was on. 13, 14, 15. Row 15 would put me on the knit row for that set of 4. So I might still be correct. I'm gonna have to frog this. So I think, for my sanity, I'm going to be done recording for now. I hope you all have a good whatever time it is. It's time somewhere. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will see you next time. Thistle.